Hello, I'm Angela.
And I'm Marie, the second half of this mother and daughter team.
Welcome to Chakra Checkups.
We're here to guide you on your quest for spiritual knowledge and enlightenment. This is a trigger warning. We will be discussing abuse, violence, and rape scenarios in parts of this episode. Okay.
Hi.
Hello.
I want to get more in detail about entities today.
Okay.
So I know you talked about it before, but give us a refresher. What is an entity and how do you get them?
Okay. Well, an entity is a collection of thoughts that many people have and will continue to have. And if you think of millions and millions of thoughts that are the same, they will attract to one another, and then they become like little animated creatures. And then if you have something happen to you that resonates with that thought, they will come and stick on your body, or sometimes inside your body and your energetic system. So
right, because you said before also like dark energy attracts more dark energy, or vice versa.
Exactly. Thoughts are things, and negative thoughts attract negative thoughts. And in this case, in entities are thoughts that have become animated things. Then they get somewhat of a personality. Depending on how large they are, it can be quite a personality. So it depends on what you have going on, how large an entity and how complex it could be. Entities are serious based on how big they are. Sometimes I've seen them up to 8 or 10 feet, which is huge for an
Wow.
entity.
Yeah.
How dark they are. I've seen them so dark they look like they're sucking in light. Very, very black. If they're inside the body or outside the body, I've seen some that were wrapped around somebody's spinal column, which is very bad. And a lot of them are just almost not even touching the person, or just barely touching a person, which was not very serious. How much detail they have. Some of them barely you can make out any kind of shape or pattern, but others have this very ornate pattern to them, which means there was a lot of complex thinking involved. Now, all of these are factors that have to do with how complex this entity is and what went into making these thought forms.
Mm-hmm. So what makes the difference between what's like one that's attached on your spine or not touching you, or things like that?
Well, there are basically different kinds of entities, and a lot of that has to do with how you got them and who you were when you got them. The very worst type of entities, the darkest, the biggest, the most complex, would probably come to someone who has been the perpetrator of a crime, a violent crime. So that would be if, for example, if I murdered somebody or caused them to have a car accident or pushed them down a staircase or something of that nature, I could get not the injured person, but I could attract to me a very dark and even possibly demonic entity. When you do something like that, you actually separate from your soul body when you do very, very violent and awful acts to another human being or even to an animal. And when you separate is usually when entities come. Entities can be thought of sort of like placeholders.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that matches the darkness, and comes in and holds the place where you went away. And they hold the place until you are ready to come back. So in the case of a murder, you would be they would be holding the place until you were ready to somehow come back and resolve that energetically within your system.
Right. But I can't imagine that any of our listeners have gone out and murdered people, but
I know there are good people out there that have entities, so how did they end up getting an entity?
Right. Although it's nice to know that, I mean, if you sense somebody, like if you walk down the street and you sense somebody, seems like they have a really dark and demonic thing on them, keep in mind that that might be a person that has done something like that. So stay well away from that person. So the second type of entity is the person that was the victim of such an attack.
uh-huh.
If the person has been shot or pushed down a staircase or has been molested or raped or beaten up or something of that nature, those people will get very dark entities because what was done to them was very dark. And
Mhm.
also because at the time that happened, what happened to them was unimaginable for them. And to the degree it was unimaginable, their soul kind of, they said, oh, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to see this. I don't want to be here. And they go away. And so this gives the opportunity for an entity that matches the horrific level of what just happened to come in, and it kind of holds a place. In a way,
Yeah.
it's a service.
Yeah, the person's gone out of body and this entity, like, are you getting it from that person that has done the act to you? Like, it's just transferred, or is it something that is just attracted to you because of the act?
You're getting it because these things have happened before, and there are these thought forms and entities out there in the astral, and they're attracted to the dark event.
Okay.
So they're not coming from the person that did it to you. They're coming because you suddenly had this, you were a person of light, and all of a sudden, boom, you have this very dark thing happen, this very dark and serious thing, and that's like rings like a bell. Suddenly
Mhm.
my life is crashing, and you vacated, you ran, your
Right.
soul separated from you, and you blacked out, or you decided to go comatose, or whatever you do to try to deal with something that you don't want to deal with, which is very understandable. And an entity will come in and fill the vacant spot that you have left in your energetics, but it will match the crime or the attack,
Yeah.
which unfortunately attracts to you the possibility of more attacks.
Which goes
That's
back to the, dark energy attacks, more of the same.
exactly, which unfortunately is why many people that have been raped more than once, and
Yeah.
many people that have been in fights that they didn't initiate wind up in fights more than
Yeah.
once.
Well, the same horrible thing happened to people out there that, don't really deserve it.
Exactly, exactly. The third type of entity, which is less serious, is when the person does something to themselves that is really not a great idea. A very typical one that I have had and seen many, many times is an entity that looks like a snake that is down somebody's throat. And typically these entities you get when the person takes either usually a street drug, some drug that they're not supposed to take, or they drink so much that they pass out. So they either take a drug and pass out, or they drink a huge amount of alcohol or something else that would cause them to go unconscious, like they're roofied, or something like that, but they do it to themselves and they go unconscious, and oftentimes some irresponsible activity follows that, like someone when they're semi-conscious will have sex with them that they normally wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
engage in that activity, and these people will get entities in their body,
Mm-hmm.
and those are less serious, but they're still serious enough that they'll cause a lot of problems. These entities that go down people's throats, they cause them to have chronic sore throats, coughing, um, choking feelings, sometimes chest pain, neck pain, headaches. And again, they attract the same, they cause the person to want to repeat the behavior. So, unfortunately, once you have one of these entities down your throat, you feel like doing the same behavior over and over again. So if it was a drinking problem, you want to drink and you'll drink till you pass out. Or if you took drugs, you'll be tempted to do it again. And again, you'll pass out. And you repeat the same irresponsible behavior.
Yeah, do
I,
you think that, most like addicts, whether it be drugs or alcohol, like has one of these things attached to them, or can you be like an addict without having an entity?
you can be an addict without having an entity, but I'm surprised sometimes how often I'll see somebody and they'll say, yes, I was a drug addict and I was an alcoholic for many years. I try to be tactful when I'm doing a reading. And when I'm talking on the phone with a person, I'll say, this usually happens when you got drunk or took drugs and you passed out, and then maybe followed that with some very irresponsible behavior. Has that ever happened to you? And sometimes the person will say, oh, all the time. I've 20 or 30 times.
Yeah.
And it's hard to imagine that somebody would have something that caused them to wind up in bed with somebody they never want to be in, or cause them to get drunk and have a car wreck or something, that they would follow that to down the road 20 or 30 times, but they do.
Yeah, and I guess I'm personally interested in this kind of entity just because I have a friend who, is very open about being an alcoholic, but I believe to be a really good person. And he does kind of get into this hopeless thing. Well, I'm just an addict. It's just who I am. And that's just not going to change. And I think in some ways he wants to not be like that. And then others, he, continues to go back to drinking himself almost to like an unsafe level for his, human existence.
Well, I don't want to make somebody schizophrenic or anything of that nature, but what I do try to do sometimes is get the person to recognize that this is not their energy. This is a separate energy, and that voice that is saying that is a separate voice. So I've had people that were struggling with this, and I say, let's name this entity something. I had
Yeah.
I had one person that said, okay, I'm gonna name my entity Hitler.
Yeah.
And and they'd go to dinner and they'd say, well, Hitler's saying I should drink a lot of drinks, but I'm not going to.
Right. And that
Because
just helps like separate it from their own
yes,
energy.
yes, it does. Because the more you're saying that this is not me, this is not in my energetics, or it's not who I am anymore, the more you get separation, the more you begin to think of this as a separate from you and not your energy, the more light will come into the part of you that that entity was holding, and the weaker and weaker that entity becomes. And sometimes when I've done this with people, they didn't really realize they had an entity, and as they start to name it and they hear the thoughts of this second voice saying, go misbehave, go get drunk, go take drugs, and they don't pay attention to it, or they start to have a dialogue with it and win, suddenly they can feel the entity and sometimes even see it on their body, and then they're like, whoa, I actually do have something, and I am feeling it now. I really, really want to get rid of it. And then they begin to engage in more separation from it. And it's once you start to separate from it, move it farther out of your energy or to just the outside of your body, the weaker that thought form becomes, and you're beginning to win the battle. And if you get to the point where this is completely gone, you won't have that desire to do that anymore. And you'll look back and go, why did I ever want to do that? And that
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense.
Mhm. Yeah, because if you do have an entity, these entities are kind of trying to get you to do more, drink more, be unconscious.
Whatever was the trauma,
Uh-huh.
whatever it was, and I've had some very bizarre cases of entities with people. We had one young woman was brought to me that she had a boyfriend that she thought she was going to marry, and they were going to live happily ever after, and the whole
Yeah.
Cinderella
The
thing,
whole 9 yards.
the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
So she didn't take her birth control and let herself get pregnant, and then sprung this on him thinking this would, make the whole package move faster. Instead, he just insisted that she go get an abortion and they break up, and which she did, but under great duress. And she was very, very distraught about the whole thing. So
Yeah.
she went and she got this, you know, abortion. And then the very next day, what she did is she tried drugs for the first time in her life and got very, very drunk and then passed out. And an entity came into her body that was mimicking like having a baby in her belly. And I actually saw
Whoa.
her lift up her shirt, and there was like, you could see like movement in her
Oh, that's
belly.
so creepy.
It was super creepy. And she had nausea and she was throwing up, like she was pregnant. And it was, and she was half the time she was standing staring, and you wave your hand in front of her face and she was just comatose. The other half the time she seemed completely normal, but very unresponsive, bland, no highs, no lows, not angry, not sad, just kind of no personality.
Yeah.
It took me and another medium about a week and a half to sort this girl out and to get this entity out of her belly and to get her so she could respond and have a conversation all day long.
Yeah. Which, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's a lot of healing, but that actually isn't like a bad timeline of something that might be causing you a lot of health issues to kind of completely get rid of it either.
No, it's not if you're lucky enough to have a couple shaman free to mess with you
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
a whole week. But mostly I see people that this has been going on for years,
Right.
years. Even in the last year or last 6 months, I've talked to some people and done readings for people that this has been going on for 20, 30 years.
Well, right, because we tend to go to Western medicine first if we're having health issues.
Yes. Well, and in the case of a really dark entity that somebody has done something to you, well, this accident happened and now I'm depressed and now I'm alcoholic or I'm this or that.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, you just got a memory, an echo from another past life that came to you at the same age that when you were killed in another past life.
Yeah, so how would we know if we do have an entity or if it's something that we should look into? Like what are some signs that that's probably more likely what's going on?
The interesting thing about that is about 99% of the time, the really serious entities, the people know they have them. If they suspect they have them, they probably do. Even people that don't believe anything about what I say is true. I mean, even my mother-in-law, who thought everything that I was doing was total bunk. I said to her, "You have an entity." She said, "I know that." I've never, not one time can I remember telling someone that had a serious entity that they had one and they did not know about it.
Uh-huh.
There's something about having something that huge energetically attached to your soul body and your body that you can't miss. So the people that have something very serious like that, they know. The less serious ones, that's a little bit more difficult to tell. They may or may not know, but they're not surprised when I tell them. It's not a total shocker or anything like that.
Okay, so then for the minor entities, is that mostly presenting itself as like a health issue that someone does know about? What are some signs that someone might have something more minor?
Yes, generally a minor entity will cause health issues. There'll be something that a pain, uh, fever spikes, soreness, things that you keep going to the doctor for, and everything, all the tests come up fine,
Uh-huh.
but you keep having problems. I think I mentioned a little girl in one of the podcasts that had a horrible entity, and she was sick for years and years and years. And they did every test known to man. They literally bankrupted the entire family doing tests on this little girl, and everything came up normal.
Mm-hmm.
And she was throwing up every day and having migraines every day for years. So
Mm-hmm.
you'll never get a positive test on an entity or on a PET scan or anything like that. So if someone's out there and they have some weird or potentially negative behavioral pattern and they're having these weird health issues, there's a good possibility that they're dealing with some sort of an entity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the way you solve that, of course, is to face up to the fact that you have separated from yourself because of the stress of the event, and to bring yourself back to really look at that and say, no, I want to come back into my body. I want to be back in my body, and I'm not going to allow this energy to be in my body anymore.
Uh-huh.
Once you positively move the energy out, all the symptoms go away. No longer have this desire to do that behavior.
Yeah, so what does that look like for us in a practice? Is that a meditation? Is that just reassuring thoughts of like, I want to be in my body throughout the day? Or how does someone do that?
Well, it starts by definitely getting into your body and being in your body. And I've talked a lot about that. Is you have to, first of all, be willing to have your soul in your body, because you can't heal almost anything very well if you're not grounded in, it's not in your body. And the
Uh-huh.
minute you start to be in your body, you're going to make any entity weaker, because the whole premise of why they're there is because you were not.
Uh-huh.
So fundamentally, that's a big improvement right there. You're okay. I'm back. I'm home.
Yeah. And someone that's been out of body for a long time, I know that sometimes you can feel like a rush of emotion come back from the trauma. And to me, for some people, I think that would be, well, no, I don't want to face all of these emotions. Like, I don't want to be in my body.
Well, yes, unfortunately, that does happen. A lot of times they'll put someone back in their body, and then the next 24 hours are kind of like hell for them. And they'd say, well, that was the worst idea ever. Um,
Right.
and, the other, it's not exactly an entity, but that happens sometimes too when people, they'll fall off a cliff or something like that, and their soul gets pushed out, and then I push it back in, and it corrects a lot of problems they have. It doesn't correct immediately, is they now download however many emotions that they were holding for however long that was out. So that could be 20 years worth of emotions, or 5 years, or 3 years, whatever it was. And it kind of hits them very fast. So they might have a week or a month of constant angst from everything they were going through while this was disassociated. And that takes a bit of processing. So they'll call and say, yeah, my pain went away, but now I'm a wreck. What'd you do to me?
Right.
And they do get through it, and it helps if they know what's going on, so they can kind of roll with it. But that does happen sometimes.
Right.
But
So
on
I
the
guess
other,
if you're looking to get back in your body and start doing some of these healing works, maybe plan a couple days off of work afterwards.
well, or be prepared to feel some things.
Uh-huh.
If you're not used to feeling anything and suddenly you're going to feel something. I put someone in their body yesterday, and he said, well, this doesn't feel very good.
Right. Because you're not very used to it at that point.
Well, if you've been completely ignoring your body and it's full of pain and entities, and then suddenly you come in, it isn't going to feel very good.
Uh-huh.
On the other hand, you can start now, what you maybe need to do. Oh, wow, I'm in pain. My knee's all swollen. I didn't know that. Maybe I'll put some ice on it. You begin to realize you have a body, and take care of it.
Right. Well, and it's just a
I
lot more healthy for you to be in your body anyways.
Much more. I had a woman that had been raped when she was 12, and she had never been in her body since that time. And then I put her in her body, and one of the first things she said was, I think I'm heavy. She actually weighed over 350 pounds.
Uh-huh.
But she didn't realize until that moment that she was actually overweight.
Oh,
She,
wow. Because she just didn't feel it.
she didn't feel anything.
Oh, wow.
And she just looked around the room and she said, I think I'm heavy.
Yeah.
And some people were laughing, but I wasn't laughing. And we saw her a couple months, was dropping weight like crazy.
Yeah.
Because she didn't need that weight anymore. Part of the reason she had the weight was to kind of pin her down. And to make her realize that she was there.
Uh-huh.
So it's very, very important to be in your body, and it also helps to keep these bad energies out. The other thing that can happen with these entities, I had one man that he was in Mexico, and he was at this very secluded spot with his girlfriend. They had stopped, and some guys came after, some people from Mexico came after him with some guns and his girlfriend off into the bushes to do whatever. We don't know, but
Mhm.
he went after them, and they shot him 3 times in his pelvis. They actually shattered part of his pelvis, and he couldn't walk or anything, and he was bleeding and everything. But then after that, they got kind of freaky, and they decided maybe they just better run for it, and they left the scene. So his girlfriend was okay, and she dragged him up onto the road and was able to save him. But when I saw him, he had an attachment to, he had an entity, but he also had an attachment to the shooter as a kind of like a ghostly demon hanging on him. So the shooter probably had an entity. This man had an entity, and he also had an attachment to the shooter. So he had all this dark energy he was dragging around from this terrible thing that happened to him. And then on the other side of his body, this was all on the left side, and on the right side, he had this angelic being very close to him, was trying to offset all this darkness on the other side, you know. And he even said to me, I feel so confused. Sometimes I feel like I'm in total light. Sometimes I feel like I'm in total darkness.
Yeah.
And I said, that's about right. But, you know, so these events, these tragic events can really create that kind of a scenario in people. And
Yeah.
sometimes other people sense it. You walk up to him and you're like, oh, I don't know about this guy. Seems kind of nice. And then, no, I don't know. He seems kind of dark.
Right.
And it's not even necessarily the person that you're working with. So there's a couple ways, you know, you can get rid of these things. One way is you set in meditation and you really start to say, I want to heal this. I want to bring myself back. I'm now willing to face this, whatever this is, and really look at what you did. You know, I got really drunk. I went out of my body, and do some forgiveness to yourself for the self harm that you engaged in, so that you're not so ashamed that you don't want to look at it anymore. The
Uh-huh.
part of the healing process is to be willing to face it, so you can be willing to integrate that into who you are, and so this entity can go away.
Uh-huh.
The other part of it is to generate light within your system where this entity is. So if it's in your throat, the throat chakra is usually a beautiful, you know, medium blue, like the best blue sky ever. Start to visualize that's what this area looks like. It's all that color, it's shiny, it's healthy. I can speak my truth, and to start to visualize that, that will tend to make it harder and harder for any dark energy, anything like a snake entity to be down your throat, because that's exact opposite of what it's doing.
Yeah.
I talked about in one episode how I was attacked, and I just sat in a chair and generated light, 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 light. But this was a very transient thing. It just had happened, and it really, this entity came from a person onto me, which could happen to somebody, but it had just happened that day.
Is it harder to heal
Although,
an entity that's been on you longer than one that you might just pick up from someone over the weekend?
yes, definitely, because the longer it's with you, the more it's integrated, and the more you have become accustomed to that voice and those personality traits that it might have. So you're probably convinced that that's you. Maybe, you know, you might think I have a dark side, or I'm not a good person, or something of that nature, when it
Uh-huh.
actually isn't you. It's an echo of a behavior, but it isn't really who you are.
Uh-huh.
And and the times when I've been able to completely extract and remove an entity from somebody in a session, the next day that person is a changed person.
Uh-huh.
They're back to how they were before this happened. And a week later they'll call and say, wow, 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 you know, my life is so different. I'm so happy. I'm This is amazing.
Right.
And that's the
Right. So,
goal.
but like you said, not everyone has access to a couple shamans that are willing to work with them on, all week. So, how can someone do the healing, with themselves and start that process of
Well,
doing
with meditation is good, and meditation with light, and also to be going, if you know there's just an incident, like took I took a ecstasy at a rave. This would be a good example because I've seen this so many times. I took ecstasy at a rave and I got really drunk, and then I went to somebody's house that I barely knew, and then we had sex and I got an STD. That would be a typical, sadly, typical thing that I've seen.
yeah.
So then you sit down in meditation and you say, okay, I want to really remember as much of this as possible. And I also want to remember as much as possible the moment I separated from myself,
Mm-hmm.
and meditate and try to get to that moment. And then when you think you have any feeling at all about that, or any feeling about that moment, say, I want to bring any part of myself and any part of my soul from that moment back to the present right now, so that I can heal.
Mm-hmm.
And breathe, and think of breathing every little part of your soul that might still be kind of stuck on the timeline, and
Mm-hmm.
bringing it back to the present moment, and breathe that part of you into your heart and say to yourself, you're safe now. I'm not going to let that happen to you anymore. And we're going to heal together, and breathe that into your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're still hearing the voice saying, okay, you did that healing, now let's go get drunk and, take some more ecstasy, then you need to do it again. You know?
Yeah.
And you keep doing it. And sometimes you do have to do it more than once, or you might have to do it every day for a month. But if you really want to heal, then just keep doing that. Because
Right.
at some point you did separate from your soul, and you really are the only one that can bring it back.
So it does really take some conscious effort on your part to heal it and start to change and not listen to that other voice anymore.
Well, you made some conscious effort to have this happen.
Mm.
I'm not talking about the people that get raped. I'm not saying that they consciously want to get raped. I'm talking about the people that have done something to themselves that caused a minor entity.
Uh-huh.
In those cases, yes, yeah, if you consciously decided, well, what the hell, I've never been drunk before, but I'm going to go over to a bar tonight and I'm going to get really drunk. Yes, then they engaged in a conscious thing, and they made a conscious effort, and they've got to make a conscious effort to bring it back. And to the degree that they've had it, if it was a month, won't take too long. But if it's been 20 years and they've been repeating the pattern it's going to take some conscious effort to get it all back.
Mm-hmm.
But not 20 years, maybe a month, maybe 2 months.
Yeah.
And, if you've been going down that road for 20 years and you can clear it up in 2 months by meditating and consciously working on it for 20 minutes or 30 minutes for 2 months, isn't that worth it?
Yeah. I mean, I would say it is for sure.
For sure. It definitely is. And it won't cost you anything.
Yeah, it's just the willingness to start to heal.
You said it exactly. Willingness is the closest thing to enlightenment. Everything, it's all about willingness. I'm willing to do this now,
Yeah.
where they haven't been before. And I've seen miraculous turnarounds. When you take a step now to the darker thing, when somebody has been attacked, it's still the same process, but it's a little bit more difficult sometimes, because sometimes the person, they want to heal, but they're still not willing to confront what happened.
Right.
And sometimes they don't even have the memory of what happened. They're just blanked out for 3, 4 years, 5, 10, whatever. They have no memory. Even if there was a police report or something, they still they can't face it. So that takes a longer effort. And sometimes they need some assist from, a counselor or a shaman or a healer or a psychiatrist to even help them to get to the point where they're even willing to look at the event, in order for them to be conscious enough to bring that part of their soul back.
Mm-hmm.
That can take a very long time. It's not that it couldn't be healed in a minute, it could, but the person's been so hurt that getting to that minute can take a long time.
I do appreciate these days how we're changing the dialogue for people to be able to talk about these things more easily and share experiences so that they can start to heal or help others by sharing their experience.
I think it's very important, and it is great that we can even begin to have that dialogue and can get to the point where they go, okay, we're dealing with an entity, so what do I do?
Right.
How do I deal with this? That's a very big step, because otherwise, that, if they don't deal with it from the point of what the truth of it is, it's very hard to heal something if you don't know what it is.
Right.
When it comes to the people that have had something and they've attracted a demon, that's a whole different thing. That can sometimes literally take lifetimes. Even if the person is ready to heal it, it almost gets into the place of kind of a karma of being in the dark for a certain length of time.
Uh-huh.
And those things can be very, very difficult to heal. I'm not saying it's impossible, but that's when you really have to start to pray for grace and pray for angelic intervention.
Uh-huh.
Not that you couldn't do that anyway for any entities. That's always a good idea. But
Yeah, just asking our angels to help us.
yes, absolutely, because they will help you. But if you've committed some major acts against somebody's person, and especially if it caused them, grave injury, then you need some intervention on an energetic scale that just going to a shaman or something probably is not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that easy to get a demon to leave somebody
Or
once they get attached.
what would someone have to do to even get one of these things attached to you? Because I can't imagine that's very common.
It's not very common, but it is out there. Well, they would have to, like I said, they would have to murder somebody or rape somebody or beat somebody up or torture somebody
Yeah.
but I mean, it sounds like that's not that common, but on the flip
Yeah, I
side
mean
of it,
that stuff definitely happens for sure.
for sure it happens. I have many, many readings where I go down and I look at all the energy of how badly the person's been beat up, and then I'll say, wow, this looks bad. What was your childhood like? And they'll start talking about horrific things that happened
Mm.
to them and to their brothers and sisters. So apparently it is out there and it does happen.
Yeah. So how do we prevent getting an entity, and if we have healed from another one, preventing bad energy to come back into us?
Well, if you've had an entity, say from drugs or drinking or something like that, you should never drink to excess, take street drugs, or do that again. You're best if you didn't drink at all, because you're going to be a lot more vulnerable to falling back into that. So,
Okay. Which
I
makes a
mean,
lot of sense, and that's I think exactly what they say in like the AA programs and stuff as well. So
well, AA, they're not doing it from a psychic level, but they're basically still dealing with the same energetic.
right.
And it's a lot harder to stay clean if you fall right back into the same thing you're doing.
Uh-huh.
And of course, if you've been abused, and you're trying to heal it, I always say, are you still hanging out with the person that was doing that? Because if you are, the best thing is to get away from that environment, to put yourself into a healing environment.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's not possible, but most of the time it is possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know there's definite programs out there to like help battered women with shelter and being able to move out.
Or battered men. I
Or
mean, not
battered men.
only
Yeah, I
women
know
are.
that there's programs out there that help people in those situations.
Yeah. I had one woman come to me one time and wanted shelter at my place, and I started talking to her, and she started talking about her husband hitting her, and then she started talking about hitting her husband. I said, "Wait a minute. You're hitting him? So you're abusing him also, And she said, "Well, that doesn't matter." I said, "Well, wait a minute."
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that does matter. And the more I talked to her, the more I began to feel like she was the worst in the family of this whole big mess that they had going on. And I
Right.
said, I think I'm not gonna give you shelter. I think you got to go home and work this out and hopefully stop beating on your husband. Maybe he won't hit back.
Yeah.
But definitely you can't go back into the same scenario that you've been in and have, not return or call back the same entity.
Mhm.
It's interesting when you look at entities, there are different kinds of entities for different kinds of things that have happened. People that have had abuse, their entities all look the same. So I can walk into a room and with 100 people and look around, and I'll say, oh, abuse entities, they look sort of like a gray, green, bluish, brownish octopus, and they're usually wrapped around from their throat to their abdomen, and they look like these tentacles all over. And so I'll say, wow, there's 1, 2, 3, 5, 15 people in this room that have been badly abused by looking at the same entity.
Mhm.
And just like these drug entities, they look like red snakes, that are either down the throat or wrapped around the throat. So I go, oh, they're the people that are suffering
Uh-huh.
from drug addiction.
Yeah,
These
it's
different,
interesting that it would present itself in the same visual.
yes, almost exactly. So now when I do a reading and I see an entity, I go, okay, we're dealing with a major abuse problem here, a major unresolved abuse problem.
So not going back into the same scenario that caused us to get these entities is one way, but is there energetically a way we can like put up a barrier to not attract them again?
Generating light within yourself in a every day. If you sit down and you see these things are affecting your chakras, so if you just get a chakra chart so that you have a visual to look at, and you spend a few minutes every day looking at that and saying, my root chakra is shiny red, my second chakra is a beautiful tangerine, my solar plexus chakra is a sunny yellow, and get that enough memorized that you can ongoingly see that helps, because you're putting that color light into your thoughts or things, and these entities are thoughts. So you're using those thoughts to combine this thing that is dark. It's usually black or brown or very, very dark blue. It's not going to be any of those colors. So you're going to transform the color of you from dark brown, black, dark blue to beautiful chocolate colors.
Uh-huh.
And that definitely works.
Yeah, it sounds like a really good exercise to do in general, even if we don't have an entity. Just sparkle
Yes,
us up a
well,
little bit.
exactly. I do all day long. If any negative thought ever crosses my mind, I breathe in light, breathe out the darkness, breathe in light, breathe out the darkness. I see something on the news I don't like, breathe in light, breathe
Right.
out that, you know, just because I don't want to attract any darkness, and I rather have light in me. But when I sit down to meditate, then I just think of everything that is light in me lighting up, and the sparkles of the light start to expand out from the center until I'm just in a cloud or a golden egg, and I'm surrounded by a soft glowing light,
Mhm.
and nothing else can come in there. The other thing that really helps, and it's a very practical thing and people don't realize it, is not to wear black.
Okay.
People that people that have dark energy or black in their chakras want to wear black. And I have been in ceremonies where there are these entities, and they drop off somebody and they're literally looking around where they're going to go next, and they go to the darkest thing in the room.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of times that's the person with the black pants on.
Right.
So if you're trying to turn a new leaf, go look in your closet, and if all those clothes are black, put them in a bag in the garage or something and
Start buying a bunch
replace.
of white clothes.
Well, it doesn't have to be white, but lavender, light blue, forest green,
Yeah.
some shining yellow, something that's not the color of the darkest demonic energy that you are trying to get rid of.
Right.
And you will feel different. It feels awkward. If you've been in dark energy and you have an entity and you put on all white clothing, you're going to feel kind of naked and weird. But it's probably what you need.
Bad news for everybody that wants to wear the little black dress, but
Well, it's interesting that you want to go out on the town and you wear a black dress.
right.
What do you want to track there? I don't know. Maybe if you wore lavender flowers would be a little better.
Yeah.
Lavender's like the crown chakra. It's wisdom and spirituality.
Attract more of what you are, right?
And maybe who you would rather be with
Mm-hmm.
than the little black dress.
Yeah.
Food for thought there if you don't want to come home with an entity.
Yeah. Yeah. Start thinking about the different colors of your chakras as relating to your own chakras, focusing on getting back into your body and breathing in light. And so, I mean, that seems like a pretty good set of tools to start to heal if you think you have an entity.
Buy some lighter clothing and meditate and think of bringing back any part of you that was separated in those traumatic events.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us today. And if anybody else has any questions that you are feeling are left unanswered, feel free to either send us a voice message or an email. There's a link to send us a voicemail in the podcast description. So that'll be there. All you have to do is click the link.
And we'll be happy to answer your questions and enlighten you.
Yeah, yeah. Otherwise, we'll have another episode for you next Tuesday.
Goodbye for now.